I wish I would have learned way earlier in life that you listen to those that have gone before you. You take the hard path the first time. You don't take shortcuts. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to pay dividends down the road. And never, ever don't be afraid to start in the trenches. There's entitlement is such a brutal thing. If you ever want to be a leader of any sort, doesn't matter if you're, an athlete. It doesn't matter if you're in an office or teaching somebody else. No one's ever going to follow you if you haven't done it yourself, or you wouldn't do it yourself.
Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm going to keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Well, hello there, friends. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast with me, Bradley Hartman. On the show, we talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Capital One Trade Credit. If you are interested in growing revenue while decreasing risk by leveraging an incredible digital platform to make it easier for your customers to buy from you, you will want to investigate Capital One Trade Credit. And speaking of powerful platforms that are changing the industry, I'm excited to bring to you today my conversations with two of my friends, Mr. Conor Sedam and Ed Kubiak of Higharc. Higharc is spelled Higharc. And if that sounds familiar, you may recall we connected with Ed Kubiak on episode 101, which I know all of a sudden seems like a long time ago. We connected at the LBM Strategies Conference in, I believe, October of 2019 and released the episode shortly thereafter before the entire world caved in. So this was a nice revisit with Ed to see what has changed over the last couple of years with Higharc. So what is Higharc? Well, Higharc will help a builder design, sell in 3D, and get permit-ready construction documents all in one place. The tagline they're using, at least on their website right now, is concept to construction in days, not months. Higharc, they say, is the automated all-in-one web platform for home builders, so they can easily manage plans, plan standards, and options in one place, 100 times faster than CAD. They handle takeoffs. They say you can get accurate materials lists for every home automatically to eliminate estimating errors. So a lot of promises there, but I think this collection of talent that they have at Higharc positions them really well to change the way that we build. So for the past 3+ years, Ed Kubiak has been the director of builder partnerships. Before that, he was a vice president of construction at 2 custom home building companies. And before that, for 6 years, I worked with him at Pulte Homes, and he was extremely talented and was an early leader. He was a guy who was going to be a project manager before he was 25 years old. As for Conor Sedam, he graduated from Miami University. That's right, J.Crew-U in Ohio. Mascot is the Redhawks. That's right. As a ginger, I dig it. Redhawks. I worked for him at Pulte Homes, and part of what made this episode special for me is, as you've heard, I've done some episodes with Carl Moyer, who is the director of human resources at Parr Lumber Company. We are collaborating on, and we are grinding through the book that will come out. I'm thrilled. It's coming along, day at a time. Our book, Yes, Fear Works. And we put out 5 chapters. We made it into a workbook. If you are interested in getting a copy of this for free to help your team, we have extras. I'd love to share it with you. I'll put it in the mail free of charge. It won't cost you a nickel. Feel free to email me directly at bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. Well, anyway, Carl and I have been working on Yes, Fear Works, which is a management leadership book. And it is definitively written for my past self. When I was a young manager, probably wasn't even very much of a leader, but I was in charge. I was an area project manager, and Conor worked for me back in 2006. So we share some stories, good, bad, and ugly, about those times. So Conor worked at Pulte for 4 years. Then he got into remodeling. He did a little commercial work. He worked his way up into a leadership role in a residential construction company before bringing over a little over a year ago into Higharc to help scale the business. So in this episode, we get an update on Higharc. We talk about management, we talk about leadership, and we finish off with a little bit of negotiation and some of the most important wisdom that we have received from our mentors. I really enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of fun. I hope you can get at least 1 or 2 insights from it. I firmly believe that you can. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Conor Sedam and Ed Kubiak of Higharc. As always, thank you for listening. Mr. Ed Kubiak, Conor Sedam of Higharc, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Well, Ed, it feels like a
very
lifetime away, but you and I hooked up, I believe it was October in Austin, the LBM Strategies event, and then subsequently we released episode 101. Just missed out on getting the 100, Ed. We're now pushing 275 episodes. So I said, if you're going to come back on the show, Ed, you got to bring something special. I wasn't anticipating you bringing another human, Conor, but nonetheless, I'm glad we're here. I'm going to jump in. Ed, talk to me. What does a director of builder partnerships do? And then Conor, I want you to kind of fill me in a little bit on the builder lead role within Higharc.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again. Thanks again for having me here, Brad. This is great. I always enjoy having some time together and catching up. You know, it's funny. I think back a lot about our home building days and how much even my current role kind of parallels with those home building days, you know, in kind of a project management role or thinking further out, you know, as we start to scale our business and grow our business, it's all about customer health and making sure that we're developing our product in the right way, servicing our customer, giving them the tools that they expect, and thinking, you know, further out. And I think Conor will tell you a little bit more about the details of his day-to-day, but it's my responsibility to be thinking further out. You know, where is our company going to be? Where's our business going to look like in the next 12 to 18 months to make sure that we're building good processes and systems, and we've got the team on board to get there.
Okay, great. I'll circle back to that in a minute, but I appreciate that. Conor, builder lead role. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day, you know, it's kind of funny. It's in a way what I started out doing with Pulte 20 years ago, which is just instead of, you know, being a warranty manager and servicing homes, I'm servicing our accounts with our clients, making sure that the product that we are putting out for them works properly, architectural updates, feature updates, figuring out what they need to make the product work better, figuring out what would make them use our product more, all those kind of things that, you know, it's actually pretty similar, except that, you know, there's no 2 a.m. plumbing leaks, which is nice. So
the old 2 a.m. plumbing leaks. Not too much nostalgia over those calls.
Just a couple of them.
So tell me about the progress of Higharc. If I just go to the website, it's been exciting just to see the interaction. And I would just tell people, just go to Higharc.com and just go experience that first 30 seconds or so of what it would be like to go to design your own home is exciting. But tell me about the progress and how are you measuring your growth and how are we kind of quantifying scale? Do you guys do that in number of homes built, in relationships, or a combination of both? Ed, maybe talk us through those and kind of where you were back in late 2019. And then, yeah, obviously I'm curious on how kind of COVID-19 affected you guys as well.
Yeah, lots of changes, and I don't know. I guess relatively, it's a short period of time as far as the business goes, I think. But because of what the world has been through over the past few years, it seems like an eternity. And like where we were back in that summer or fall of 2019, our product at the time, our goal was to replace the need for manual drafting. You know, so we have this team of engineers and such that are taking you have a home plan that is sold to a customer, and somebody has to go through and do all the manual work to make a lot specific set of plans. And there's all this time involved. There's potential for things to be inaccurate or mistakes to happen, which cause problems in the field. That's been the core of our product. And back then we were still building that, and we were looking for initial partners, and we called them like pilot customers, right? Guys that would kind of take a chance on us to say, hey, we've got this concept that we're building. If you guys are willing to be part of it, and if we could possibly build it, you'll be amongst the first to use our product. So that was a couple years ago. And in that time, we've kind of seen that through, right? Those pilot builders that we had that took a chance with us, they're building many homes today. They've got tools that very few other builders, really no other builders have access to right now. This year, we're kind of in that product launch phase at IBS this year. We started releasing, for the very first time, we were part of IBS in like the startup zone. So we had a long line of builders that were very curious with what we did, and this promise that the industry has always had with that there would be a single source of truth and this centralized data model that could automatically feed all the other parts. If you change the plan, it's automatically going to feed your sales and marketing documents. It's automatically going to create the plans you need to build. And then all of a sudden, when a monkey wrench is thrown and products change, you can't get that window anymore. How the heck do you update the master plan and all the necessary lot specific plans and all the sales renderings and everything else? It just doesn't happen. And that's what causes so much friction and so much loss in the home building industry today. That's what we're ultimately building now. So we've gone from the hub, which was the starting point, like the heart and soul of the home building process is really the plan. You have to have a really good set of plans to build anything. And now we've been building around that. So we have a sales experience now where a sales consultant can use the Higharc platform. Some of our builders even have it live on their website. So a customer can configure a home on their website and then build a home potentially, sign a contract, build a home, and they're ready to move forward. At the same time, then the builder has all the plans ready to go for permit. You've got all the data, like key building measure type data, so you don't have to do any manual estimating. All of that data is coming out and can feed into different ERP systems and different data sources that you have to manage your finances. So the key is just kind of that whole loop, that whole hub, bringing it all together into one spot. So that's where we're at today, and we're starting to bring on more and more builders, and start to scale the tool overall instead of just using having some pilot builders test drive for us.
Yeah. So Conor, as you engage with your builders and you think about servicing them, addressing their needs, the question that I would have is how often are they suggesting features and different things to do that would be helpful for them? Yet obviously a hard part of the software and building out your entire platform is discerning what are the things that we're going to double down on and put our capital, our talent, and our time into versus things that, quite frankly, would be further down the path. But again, you've got these a new product, a new platform there that you want to make them happy, but you can't say yes to everything. How do you balance those needs in your role?
A good part about our company still being younger is we still are focusing on product development and building out, the needs of builders. And one very interesting thing about, I think, home building in general is how differently home builders do things, not just in terms of like construction techniques. We were in Raleigh-Durham yesterday with another one of our associates who is in Houston, and he had literally never been in a basement.
Right.
In his life.
Yeah.
We took him into a basement and it completely blew his mind. So that just shows you, like, not only do builders do things differently across the country, and, and I told Ed, prior to working for Higharc, I'd never built a house on a slab foundation before. I'd only ever done basements, so I was in Chicago and Michigan. So there are definitely times where we have to say, that's a really good idea, but I think that's very specific to your need and the way you do things, but trying to transition that to, here's a feature we do have, and it would probably actually make more sense for you to try to, and it would be beneficial for you, faster, easier, more cost effective if you utilize this tool that we have in this way instead of this way that you might think you want to do it. It's been nice to be able to work with builders all across the country and kind of leverage the different techniques and feature requests that we've gotten. So usually now, if somebody has some idea like, hey, it'd be really great if we could like color code plan phases. That's one that came up last week.
Okay.
And it was like, yeah, well, we had a builder and they said that's what they really hated about the last software that they had. And here's 5 reasons why. Here's the 5 reasons you probably never even thought about, why that was a bad idea. So having builders all over the country and kind of trying to get an insight into the different ways they do business has made that process a little easier.
I can only imagine just talking to folks across the country, when obviously you have a depth of experience kind of in the upper Midwest, but talking to folks across the country and what would be obvious to them or what would make the most sense to them would I'll put you guys in a really unique position of just, right, learning nationally all at one time when you're developing software to really help people be successful. So yeah, that's kind of fascinating to think about. Ed, I want to ask, kind of just go back to think about when we were together last. Obviously, two big things have really rocked the industry in different ways. One is COVID-19 and kind of the pandemic and the response to in different parts of the country. And the other one is the subsequent wave and demand for construction services, new homes. And then, tied in there is the unbelievable commodity volatility that we've seen. How have those two forces impacted you guys as you guys are scaling up the business?
I would say in a lot of different ways, that all of a sudden, but builders are realizing what they need are tools that give them agility, so like as you have product changes, how easily can you change your system and all of your, all the applications across it, right? So if you have a very traditional system like most builders have is a front-loaded system. So before I open a new community, I'm going to get a master set of plans. I'm going to bid it out to all my subs, all my options, all the information I possibly need. I'm getting all of that data, putting it into some kind of a database, a spreadsheet or an ERP of some sorts. So now I've got everything all in all this static data that exists in this big database. As soon as something changes, I have to go and update that in every possible place where that data exists in that platform. And that's a really hard thing to do without having humans do that work. First you have to know where to find the information, and then you have to go physically change it. And hopefully you're not interrupted along the way and you don't have a slip of the finger on the keyboard or anything like that. Having agile tools that are live in the web and completely dynamic. So as things change, like that's one of the tools that we provide that no other system really provides right now is if you've got a red line in the field and it's a window change, for example, you just can't get the window that you had last week, so you need to apply a new one. Well, you're going to make the change in one place in our platform, and then you kind of manage it as a rule or setting and say, okay, well, that window I want to apply to all of these communities, and I want it to apply to these divisions or these plans and these different phases of construction. And through a toggle, you would just manage that and automatically update not only your construction plans, but all of your sales and marketing documents as well. Change management and agility is so much more important than it ever was because there's so much more change that happens on a daily basis. And the consumer looks at it all differently from a sales and marketing side. I'd say that's the other half of it. Builders all talk about changes every day. Customers have changed the way that they buy.
Yeah, that change management and where we all came from, and a big part of our job was to double check what sales is using, what was signed off on, what the framer's using. And that was part of our job, is to make sure these special red line documents that only Chuck has, and they're slammed against in his van against the windshield in his dashboard. That's the only place the master set lives. You're like, oh my gosh, to be able to make a change like that and feel confident that's rolling through everything seems like a dream. All right, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Mr. Conor Sedam, I am in the process of writing with a friend of mine, with a client of mine, a guy named Carl Moyer. I sent you guys some propaganda. I think I gave you some homework. I asked you to fill it out. It was the first, among the first 5 chapters that we've got for Yes, Fear Works, but There's a Better Way. And as I was talking to my co-author, Carl, who works at Par Lumber in the Pacific Northwest, I said, there's a very distinct place and time, and for an audience of one that I am writing this for. And it was for me. It was circa 2006 in a little place called Red Wing View. We were the far, far north, because there's already a far north. We were even farther north than that. And there wasn't a whole lot of people that I stay in touch with now. We can dig into why that is later. You were one of them. And I'm writing this book on leadership and management. And I literally say, like, this is the book I wish I had. I was relatively intelligent. I was very ambitious. I had major deficiencies in other places that probably made me somewhat difficult to work with. Conor, question for you. What are the 3 primary adjectives you would use today to describe the management? If some days there's probably no leadership, it was only management, that's fine. To describe the management in Red Wing View circa 2006.
Well, before I say that, I have to say, I too, Brad, wish that you had this book in 2006.
I thought you were going to say, I wish you had it. I was like, yeah, no, it would have been good for you too. No, for me, yeah.
No, I mean, 3 adjectives. Intimidating would be one. Intimidating, yeah. Extremely fun, though, would be another one.
Okay, all right.
And I mean, it's not a word, but it was like a band of brothers. It was like we were like kind of on this island in the middle of nowhere. It was kind of like, I don't know, hey, you 2 25-year-olds and you 8 23-year-olds, figure this out. Like, because it's too far to drive up there and figure out what you guys are doing. So just, check in once every 6 months. But it was intimidating, I would say. And I think, in some ways, especially for me, because as you probably recall, you picked me up and had an hour to myself with you driving there a lot of times when we drove up there together. So
yeah, if you lived in the city, which we did, they're like, well, we can send you anywhere. So if you got an hour and a half drive, it doesn't matter because you live in the city and we're not building the city. So yeah, for us up there, it was, I think I was 25 or 26 and we had a whole crew of, folks where I was like the oldest one. And built a lot of homes that way. We did have a lot of autonomy, but Conor, as you think about maybe less that time, but you quickly then within Pulte and then outside of Pulte started getting leadership and management roles on your own. Is there any advice where you'd say, man, I wish I knew this before, or I had made this change to be a better manager and leader in your own career?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say too, when I say it was intimidating, there are also a lot of good things that I learned from you. And that's when I say how much fun it was. You did a great job of making sure we had a really good time and we worked really hard, but, we settled trade disputes over foosball games.
We did have the foosball table. That was a key component of my leadership
on a regular
style.
basis. Yeah. So I think we had almost zero turnover up in that office. And one of the things that I've always taken with me since then is if you're not creating a culture where it's fun, and even if it's hard work, people feel like they're committed to each other and they're committed to the process. And that's especially true now with Higharc, being a company that's very in its infancy, is if everybody isn't bought in and everybody isn't going in the same direction and having fun at the same time, it's just never going to work.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's an accident that we were an hour and a half from the city, but almost everybody that was there for the length of the project.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I often talk about it and I've written about it too. We know a friend of ours, he was kind of a mentor of mine, but a leader, a guy named Bernie Pallardy. And he was always very fun to work for,
Sure.
Was very smart. And he had a line, I only heard him say it once and I've never forgot it. And he said, fun ain't free and it never goes on sale. And if you're going to work with him, you're going to work your tail off, but you're going to have fun and you're going to laugh and you are going to enjoy what you're doing. And I've tried to kind of incorporate that along the way, sometimes better than others. Ed, you on the other hand, I feel like by the time you were 12, you were like a fully grown individual, who had decades of experience. Like I remember meeting you when you were 25. I'm like, dude, this guy must have been here for 15 years. And you're like, what are you talking about? He's been here like a year longer than you have. But you and Nathan Marsh, who's been on the show as well, I feel like both you guys, leadership and management came, I don't know if it came easier. It certainly felt from the outside that it came faster. If you were kind of talking to maybe a young builder and maybe they're one of your Higharc clients and maybe it's a father who's, late 60s, early 70s and is passing the business on to his son who's 30, if you said, hey, I got 10 minutes with you, I'm going to give you one piece of advice in terms of how to lead a company or lead a group of people, what would be like the number one leadership principle that you would share with this individual?
Oh man, it's a fun one to think about. And I love these types of conversations because I love being a mentor to younger guys. And my boys are finally at that age. They're 13 and 15 now. And it's finally hitting that phase in life where they're like, they're starting to listen, and you see them teaching other people, and you're like, wow, are they teaching what I taught them, or are they teaching something different? So it's like, back then when we worked together, I probably was just better at faking it than anybody else, and people just believed it, whatever I learned was whatever it was. But what I enjoy telling people, and I think would be pretty consistent amongst the younger people that I talk with, is that, man, I continue to learn. The older that I get, and I probably learn the most from listening to my elders. I used to tell my dad, like, hey, wouldn't it be better if I could just make the mistake on my own? That way I would learn firsthand and I would understand it. And I thought I was cool when I was like 22 years old, sitting by the campfire, drinking a beer. Like, yeah, this is how you do it. Just let me I'm not going to listen to you, old man. Just let me make the mistakes. I wish I would have learned way earlier in life that you listen to those that have gone before you. You take the hard path the first time. You don't take shortcuts. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to pay dividends down the road. And never, ever don't be afraid to start in the trenches. Like there's entitlement is such a brutal thing. If you ever want to be a leader of any sort, doesn't matter if you're, an athlete. It doesn't matter if you're in an office or teaching somebody else. Like no one's ever going to follow you if you haven't done it yourself, or you wouldn't do it yourself. And I think that's probably one of the best things that my dad taught me was, as soon as I was old enough to sit in his van, he took me to work with him, and I followed him. And I did everything on a job site that you could ever do, from picking up the nail boxes in the window wells to humping lumber, around on the crummy days outside. And that's where the learning really is.
Yeah, I think the advice not that I would have listened to my previous self, but the advice I would give my previous self would be, hey, ambition and drive are good, but just slow down. Learn what you can in the moment and realize that you are in a current laboratory where you can learn things about what to do and what not to do from your own experiences, but from other people. Just slow down. And if you do that counterintuitively, right? If you go the hard path now, you'll get to where you want to go, wherever that is, faster later. And I agree. When we do mentoring and when I talk to folks too, oftentimes you get guys that are hungry, whether they're in sales, whether they're in on the supply side, in operations, or in the builder construction community, maybe on the commercial side. It's like, slow down, listen more. How can you treat this as a craft, whatever that is? And maybe it's just dealing with foundations. How can you know everything you can? And if you do that, again, it seems like you're going slower. You're not, right? And it's kind of that old military thing, is smooth is slow and slow is fast, right? This idea that slow it down, do it right the first time, you'll get to where you want to go. Conor, before we move on from this, any story stand out in your mind from Red Wing View? So we had a group of young guys, I would say very talented group. I'd say Pulte, if nothing else, they did a fantastic job of identifying and bringing on talent and training. The one that I often think about is, somehow we thought it was a good job. I think I was engaged. We were driving up an hour and a half, living in Antioch. You, me, and a couple other knuckleheads thought it was a good idea that we should rent an apartment, and that this thing, my expectations of decent living were substantially lower than they are today. But that was pushing the boundaries of, like, this was like pre-college stuff of what you'd be willing to live in. So we would go there. It was like 20 minutes away, and we'd drink, and then we'd hang out. And then I just remember there was a train or maybe a garbage truck that came by at like 3 a.m.
Garbage truck.
What was it?
Garbage truck.
Garbage truck. And we get the sleeping bags out. I look back and I'm like, what was the decision-making process there? Any story jump out in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of them, is just like, and it's probably a good life lesson, is like, work-life balance, even when you're 25, is important. If you find it necessary to rent a separate housing unit near your job because driving there is so far that you're willing to rent an apartment, buy air mattresses, and I don't know if you remember this, but we had a SpongeBob shower curtain
The whole thing was disgusting.
If that's the decision you've decided to make, you may want to take a step back and reevaluate.
You're right.
But the one that specifically comes to mind is I don't remember the guy's name, but it was the house where the first thing they did. There's three things I remember that they did. They replaced their front door with a front door that had like a glass mosaic of ducks on the front. And then
he worked for a window manufacturer that will remain nameless at this point. But yes, carry on. I remember that.
The second thing I remember about that house is they were heating their house with their fireplace, which, Pulte fireplaces were not set up as a central heating source for your house. But this guy was just burning wood in his 2-story living room trying to heat his house with it.
I remember number 3.
You already know number 3.
Yeah, go ahead. I remember. Yeah.
There's actually a good leadership lesson in this one too, though. But the last one was he put in a semi above ground pool. He dug it in like 2 feet, and then told us that it wasn't an above ground pool because it was dug into the ground 2 feet. Of course, there were HOA rules against this, and the interesting thing for me is I remember when you said, "Hey, you're coming with me to meet with this guy because I need basically somebody there to verify so that he can't say that anything that I said, that was untrue, or that he could mince my words in any way." And I remember one thing that you were extremely good at was documentation. And we went over there and you had a binder, and that binder had the date and time of every time you had told this guy he wasn't allowed to have an above ground pool, highlighted emails, handwritten notes, all this stuff. And we go down and we walked in and you didn't tell him what was in the binder. We just sat down at the kitchen table and, he very calmly said, "We told you you're not allowed to put an above ground pool. This is the HOA. This isn't my decision. This isn't me trying to stop you from doing something. This is in the HOA bylaws." And he was like, "Well, you never told me that." And you just opened the binder to page 1. We're like, November 1st, 2006 at 4:30 p.m. You asked me, "Can I put in an above ground pool?" And I said, "No." December 23rd, 2 p.m. via email, highlighted here. You asked me, "Can I put in an above ground pool?" And I said no. And this was before the age of alternative facts. It was just like the guy, he was like, "Okie dokie." And that was it. Yeah. And it was just, the value of good data has always stuck with me since that moment. It's like, if you have good data, all you have to do is say to somebody else, "Well, show me your data. If you think yours is better than mine, show it to me. Let's go." And, usually the other person can't do that. So.
Yeah. So that would have been a 26-year-old and like a 24-year-old walking in to tell a 45-year-old man who had just built a pool and a deck behind his house that he's got to rip it out. And I think too, there's that lesson there when you feel like someone's going to do something stupid, like that is the time to start collecting. Like you just feel like how often does it happen where you're like, "Oh, I saw this coming. I felt it. I knew it was coming and I didn't do anything. And now it's here." And it was a good laboratory for that with Pulte's, where you deal with all these people that are like, "A 25-year-old's going to tell me I can't do it." I'm like, "It ain't me." But we were the project manager, the face of the HOA. But yeah, of just documenting and being like, just on the off chance he's going to do something stupid, I'm going to start collecting data. I totally remember that. I could drive. I know exactly which house that is.
So do I.
Oh my gosh. All right. I'm watching the time here. Another thing I'm working on right here is negotiation. You guys, from multiple different aspects, have been very involved in negotiation. Ed, if someone says, "Hey, in 2 minutes, I'm going in to negotiate," you can fill in the blank. A house, a mattress, whatever. Anything beyond, a latte at Starbucks. And you said, "Hey, I've got a couple minutes." What would be like the number one negotiating principle that you'd recommend they consider before getting there?
Well, I've learned a lot from my kids because they're the best negotiators that I know.
Hell yeah.
But I'll say, always, obviously beginning with the end in mind, knowing what your overall outcome is going to be or what you would like it to be, trying to generate in your mind a win-win scenario, something to where you're not going in overwhelming, where it's like the conversation is like uneven at the beginning. You want to create I think some kind of a level playing field to say, hey, like letting them know a little bit, like I'm willing to give a little bit to get what I want. That's been my approach over the years. And it seems like I've been pretty successful with that. I mean, I've also wanted to take a lot of negotiation classes to get better, because I've heard from others that, some of the basics, like, hey, the first one to talk loses. And that's something I'm really bad at. When the room gets quiet, I hate a quiet room. And I lose every time when that happens. So hopefully nobody that I ever am negotiating against is listening to this. But yeah, that's simple lessons like that go a really long way. It's amazing the power of silence.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. And I think what you said at the beginning is an understated insight, which is, do you really know what you want, and do you know why? But too often we kind of dig our heels in. We find ourselves in the middle of a negotiation. I'll say, why do you want this? Or why do you want this so badly? And it's because I need to win, versus, hey, what do I want? Have I really thought deeply about why I want it? Have I considered what I'm willing to sacrifice and what I'm not willing to sacrifice to get it? And then what might this other person want? But I'm like, just that little thought experiment up front can save a ton of time. Conor, what about you? You've been in countless negotiations on the builder side. Negotiation, well, I mean, if you're in service for any home builder, that's an entirely different negotiation, but a very real one for sure. One principle that you could share that you're not borrowing from Ed, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I think it's in addition to that, which to me, that first part that Ed mentioned is do your homework. And what that leads to is do your homework so that you truly know what the true cost of what you might be giving up is, and what the true value of what you're trying to get is. Because you can get a plumber to plumb the house for $200 less, but like, is it really costing you $200 less, or is he just getting it somewhere else? And I feel like a lot of times in home building negotiations, we just focus so much on the number and never really think about, okay, what is that actually costing me? Does that mean we're third in terms of the type of attention we get if we have a warranty problem? Or, if they have to decide where a crew is going to go that day, does that mean we don't get them? Because now we just burn that $200. And if that happens 4 days on a job site, now we just cost ourselves $2,000. So I think it's really understanding the true cost of what you're trying to take from somebody and knowing the true value of what you're trying to get.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. We spend a lot of time thinking about and kind of coaching or teaching folks is, how do you think about these two things? And you'll recognize both of them is that, what's his total cost of ownership, right? And if I'm buying this thing, let's think about before, during, and after warranty. What's the cost of peace of mind if something went wrong? But then what's the cost to serve? And when I was in purchasing, and you guys experienced this as well, is you realize that there are some ways that we made it really easy on suppliers. And there are some other ways that we probably made it hard. How did the other party kind of view those? Because there was a cost to serve that was maybe higher in some regards and lower in others. So I love that. All right. I think this might be the best way to close out. I think between the three of us collectively, were able to learn from a couple legends in our home building industry here. Ed, I'm going to start with you. We got to work with a gentleman who I learned so much from, made such a big impact on my career in a relatively short amount of time. His name was Wellington Michael Rhodes. And I know he was a big supporter of yours and was a mentor of yours as well. You think of Mike Rhodes and what he shared with you, stuff that maybe you think about today. What's the number one thing that you took away from him?
I remember a fun story real quick, and then I'll answer your question. But we had a guy in our construction trailer that was deathly afraid of Mike. And if he saw the Mountaineer come rolling up to the trailer, he all of a sudden would find somewhere he had to be, and it was going to be nowhere near the job site. It's probably a 7-Eleven down the street, and you'd see him make laps around the community until that Mountaineer was gone. I've never seen somebody so afraid of another individual. Man, talk about intimidation. But I tell you what, once you get through that thick skin of Mike Rhodes, what an awesome mentor, and I could not have learned from a better guy. I mean, some of the basics, like the superintendent 101, keep your garage clean, keep your basement clean. For those of you that know basements, by the way. But it's the same. It's like the Steve Jobs, right? Like, just because people don't always see it, and like what's behind the door, like, doesn't mean it's not important. So like keeping your homes clean is really important. But I mean, as a whole, it's like, know what's in your closet. Like, before you accuse somebody of something else and you point a finger one way, know what they've got against you. So, but the best way to do that is to keep your closet clean. Don't have dirty laundry. Like, do it the right way, and don't have things that people are going to come back at you on if you do have to call them out, and be prepared that you understand what's going to happen as soon as you call them to the table.
I hadn't thought of this in years, but when I interviewed with him, he's like, "So why do you want this job?" I was like, "Well, a goal of mine is to be a manager someday." He's like, "Do you know what a superintendent is? It's a manager. So the minute you're hired, you achieve your goal. Now what?" I'm like, not doing so well. And you remember his office? He had like 13 clocks. There's clocks everywhere. And he's like, "Schedule is king." His other line that I've used on this podcast numerous times, I think about often with my own kids, is the quality you accept is the quality that sets the standard. That is, it's simple, but it's so subtle, and it applies to everything. That was great. All right, Conor, you are one of the sons, not the favorite son, but you're one of the sons, right, of the legendary, which he is, he's a legend, Scott Sedam. So for those of you who've been around the home building community, undoubtedly you have either firsthand learned from him, or you have learned someone who has learned from him. He has taught a whole generation of people how to build well. What's the number one thing you've taken away from your dad?
Well, first, to back up a step, I just think it's interesting and not a coincidence that my dad's mentor at Pulte in Chicago was Mike Rhodes. And if you ask my dad, that the question that you just asked us, who'd you learn from? Who's your mentor? He would say Mike. And my training classes at Pulte in Chicago were with Mike Rhodes. So if you want to talk about baptism by fire, I remember the first day with Mike and him just going, "I know your dad." And that was it.
I know your dad, and you are not your dad.
I think there's so many areas, but it's funny that you brought up that quote, "The quality you accept is the quality that sets the standard," because I didn't even know that was from Mike, because I steal that all the time, and I assumed it was from my dad. So it's interesting how small the circle is, and I don't think it's a coincidence that we've all ended up in the places that we are, doing the things that we are, because of these people who taught us the things that they've taught us. But in terms of actual lessons or concepts, we kind of touched on it earlier, but it's always one I've been thinking about a lot is, and we've been talking about a lot at Higharc, is the idea of how you measure something. And the numerator in how you measure something can be whatever you want. But if everyone has a different denominator, the end number is different for every person. And it's a really interesting way to think about how different everyone does things in the home building industry, and how the way I count something or the way I approach something might be totally different than you. And neither are wrong. They both get us to the end goals. But as I've worked with more builders, with Higharc all over the country, and then frankly, even worked with people at Higharc that are not in the home building industry, it's really been thinking about how do other people from different industries, different areas of the country, how do they approach problems, and what are their motivations for getting to the solutions that they got to? Mm-hmm. And not just assuming that, especially Scott Sedam as a legend or whatever. I don't take that for granted in terms of other people's input. And as far as I'm concerned, if you've been in this industry for a while, you have knowledge and you have value. And there's something that all of us can learn from anybody who's been trying to do this for as long as any of us have. And it's been really cool kind of being out of, we're still in the home building industry, but Higharc has software engineers and CAD designers and all of these types of people that I never worked with, and just getting a whole different perspective on, I think about all the time when I go on websites now, I'm like, the user interface for this website is terrible. I'm like, I never thought about that 3 months ago. Like, what?
Yeah.
How did somebody get to this, and why does it work the way it works? So that's a very long-winded answer, but I think hopefully the point rings true. Is just, my father's always been very good at thinking about how an answer became what it is and why, and what are his saying, I guess, is the best way to wrap this up, is what does what we're about to do help us sell a house to a delighted customer at a profit? That's like what it all boils down to. And if you start there, it can go anywhere, and you're eventually going to come back to that answer.
Yeah. Well, I think for those that have the discipline to think about why something works, and too often I think there's this unconscious competence that kind of falls into, this is the way we've always done it. It's been successful. This is the way things are done. But if you don't know why something is successful, and maybe this has been successful for 80 years, when it changes, it's often difficult to understand what we need to do to change to make it successful once again. And those are two different things, and it's probably too much nuance there for this discussion at 50 plus minutes or so. But anyway, that's great stuff. By the way, Conor, congrats. This is the first time in 275 episodes somebody has mentioned both the numerator and the denominator on this episode. I had to think, I'm like, which one goes on the top? Oh, that's right. But I think I got there. Yes, it's inverted, as they say. Well, gentlemen, I am excited to see what you guys are doing. I think you guys are doing something that is absolutely sorely needed. Improved communication, ways to think about building differently. I'm kind of going on a deep dive, and one of the themes this year for the podcast is thinking about how artificial intelligence can be used to help us rethink what's possible for the best ways to build. You're already on your path down there. So certainly more than enough things for us to talk about. And next time we do this, my sincere hope is that we can do this in person. So Mr. Ed Kubiak, Conor Sedam of Higharc, thank you for making time.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate the opportunity.
As always, my friends, thank you for listening. Hopefully you found this episode with Ed Kubiak and Conor Sedam of Higharc to be worth your time and attention. I want to thank Capital One Trade Credit for their sponsorship. If you, my friend, are interested in growing revenue and increasing cash flow while decreasing risk, you should check out Capital One Trade Credit and see if it's a fit for you. If you did, in fact, get value from this episode, please share it with your network. We've been thrilled to see the growth that we've had over the last 6 and 9 months for sure, as we've been doing more and more video, but also over the last couple hundred episodes, and appreciate your time and attention. Certainly realize there are a lot of other things that are competing for it. So thank you. And of course, if you're up for it, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Those mean more to us than you know, and subscribe to our videos. We are putting more and more clips out from our podcast on YouTube. So to never miss any of those little nuggets that are going out, subscribe to us on YouTube at the Behind Your Back podcast. That's all I've got, my friend. So we're going to close it like we always do with our sales and leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.